we're going to talk about guys that we're trying to trade away right now. There's a lot of players out there, some underperforming, some overperforming. Maybe you're trying to get some of these guys off of your team, looking at the long run, or maybe looking short term, seeing their schedules over the coming weeks and saying, yikes, I don't think I can sustain enough wins with these guys on my team right now. So, Jack, I'm going to start with you. Give us a guy that you're trying to trade away right
now. Right now, I'm trying to trade away Will Fuller. So Will Fuller's schedule for the rest of the season, I mean, it's tough, and the Texans aren't competitive right now. As long as the game scripts keep going their way, you could see Will Fuller gain some fantasy points. That being said, he has next week against the Browns, which is a fine matchup. Then after that, he goes up against the Patriots. He's going to draw a tough cornerback matchup there. Lions, he'll still draw a tough quarterback matchup, even though that's a little bit of an easier matchup. Then you go Colts, Bears, Colts, and then Bengals in the championship week 16. But still, Will Fuller's matchups are tough. And Will Fuller, he's been great this year, right? But it's not like his target numbers have been off the chart like some other guys who have high wide receiver 2, low wide receiver 1 value. Right now, Will Fuller has that, especially in a trade. You look at his numbers, he's put up basically 15 points or more in every single week, which is fantastic. But his target numbers the past 2 games have been 6 and 5. He had 11 in week 6, which is fantastic. He's also scored a touchdown in every week except for week 3, which I know, Shane, we talk about, you don't want to discount a guy just because he's scoring touchdowns and saying he's overperforming. That might be unsustainable right there. Will Fuller's not going to score 16 touchdowns this season. That's just an insane number that a guy like Will Fuller, while fantastic, in that Texans offense, he's just not going to meet that. He's probably overproducing where he should be at for the rest of the year right now, especially with the schedule coming up. So I'm going to try to trade away Will Fuller because he's just been so good lately.
What are some guys that you're looking to get for Will Fuller? Because, you tell people trade them away, and then they come right back at you with the question, what are you looking to get in return for them? Because Will Fuller, Jesus, I can't talk tonight, can honestly net you a pretty significant haul right now, being that he's a borderline wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I'm looking for a high-end RB2 or a high-end tight end if I'm really needy at the tight end position. I mean, there's not a whole lot of tight ends I'd go trade for. You'd probably have to package somebody if you wanted to get Travis Kelce or Darren Waller or TJ Hawkinson. Those are probably the only 3 I'd trade for right now. You probably have to throw in maybe a little bit more if you're going to get one of those guys with Will Fuller. But I'm looking to trade for a running back. We're talking a Kareem Hunt or a Joe Mixon or a Miles Sanders or a guy that's coming back right now that people are a little bit low on, but should probably be high on based on his schedule, and that's Nick Chubb. But one of those guys maybe in that area, or even I dip a little bit lower and say a Todd Gurley or an Antonio Gibson. So one of those kind of guys running back wise.
I'm going to dispute you on the Todd Gurley one in a little bit, but Lucas, I'll let you go now. Give us one player that you're looking to trade away right now.
The player I'm probably looking to trade away the most, gosh, I've got all the guys on my list are guys who obviously I don't want on my team right now just because, you never want to trade low. And I'll start with this guy, mostly because I was high on him, as was everybody else before the season. You never want to trade low. But there are certain circumstances in which trading low is still getting back better value than what they're probably worth at this point. I'm going to go with Ezekiel Elliott. I hate it too. I know everybody who drafted Zeke was, he's Ezekiel Elliott, right? He's been good year in and year out. The thing is, we've never seen Ezekiel Elliott running behind a bad offensive line. And now he is. And his matchups are not particularly good down the stretch. He's got Washington week 12, Baltimore week 13, San Francisco week 15, right there in the middle of the playoffs. So Ezekiel Elliott is a guy who I'm looking to trade away. And I'm hoping I'll be able to get something just based off his name value.
What would that include? Because I saw a tweet that was sent out to us today asking if someone should accept a trade where they would be giving away Ezekiel Elliott and getting in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I don't think he holds much value either right now.
That would not be a good trade. Ezekiel Elliott, look, I think with name value, if you package him with someone, you can make a swing at a bigger name. You could make a swing at a James Robinson, and maybe even an Aaron Jones if you package him with someone. Because, again, the name I think is still going to get you something, especially with the potential. People are going to see Ezekiel Elliott. They're going to say, oh, he's had a few down weeks. Well, he's still Ezekiel Elliott, right? He's typically very, very good. So I think, if I'm trading away Zeke, I'm looking to package him with someone and take a swing for a mid-tier wide receiver one at this point.
I'm going to say my trade away right now. I actually had this guy on one of my teams. I wasn't a fan of him coming into the season. Jack already said his name, and that's Todd Gurley. But I did my job. I traded him away. I thanked him for the nice few weeks of touchdowns, of falling into the end zone, whether it was accidentally or on purpose. Just because when you look at the schedule going down the stretch, he has New Orleans twice, which is a great run defense, and he has Tampa Bay twice. Well, the last Tampa Bay there is Week 17, so unless you play into Week 17, you don't have to worry about them. But the schedule is extremely tough, and you look at his numbers, I mean, it's baffling the past 4 weeks at his yards per attempt. 2.4, 2.7, 2.6, 2.8. The man is being out-carried. He's being out-touched almost by Brian Hill, who's literally right there, step inside beside him. The only thing keeping Todd Gurley going right now is touchdowns. He's had 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, but we've said it a million times, you can't bank on that touchdown production, and I think you're playing a dangerous game if you think Gurley is a lock and load RB2 right now. I really don't think he is. I think he's a boomer bust RB3. If he scores a touchdown, he gets into the end zone, great. He got you 10 points. Against Carolina, he got you 10.6 points, finished as the RB22 because he scored a 1-yard touchdown. He doesn't do that for you. He got you 46 yards on the ground. That's 4 points. You're talking this guy doesn't catch a pass. He's not involved in any other aspect besides the short run game. This isn't the same Todd Gurley of old that we saw. If I'm trying to trade Todd Gurley right now, I know people are afraid of David Montgomery. I understand that he doesn't have the greatest O-line. He's not in the best offense, but the opportunity for him is there. He's not blocked like Gurley is with the other running backs or limited in the passing game because Montgomery has that passing and receiving floor. If you got David Montgomery, who has a fantastic playoff schedule, I know he plays the Packers in there somewhere, you got Montgomery for Gurley, I would take that 100%. I would also take Antonio Gibson for Gurley straight up 100%. I just traded Todd Gurley for Robbie Anderson and Mike Davis. Now, this was before that Christian McCaffrey was ruled out. I don't know if you'd be able to get Mike Davis and Anderson for Gurley right now, especially since Gurley's on a bye. But if you're able to snag even Robbie Anderson straight up for Gurley, I think you have to do it. What do you guys think?
I don't hate that. I mean, you talk about just his usage, and you're right. It's not what it once was. We talked about before the season not liking Todd Gurley, and then Todd Gurley came in and was actually pretty good. Started off, I mean, I'm looking here, week 1, 4 yards per carry, week 3, 5.7, week 5, 8.6 yards per carry. But you're right. That's absolutely tapered off. If he doesn't get into the end zone, chances are, I mean, he doesn't have a game over 4 receptions and only one other game of 3 receptions. So typically he's getting 0, 1, or 2 receptions a game, and that's not going to get you sustained fantasy production if he doesn't fall into the end zone. So yeah, Todd Gurley is touchdown dependent at this point. Trading him away would not be a bad idea.
No, I'm with you there. That's absolutely fine with me.
Well, Jack, who's another name that you're trying to trade away right?
Yeah, I was going to say one name, but I'm concerned you guys are going to think I'm crazy.
I always think you're crazy, Jack.
We'll throw it out there. So Alvin Kamara is one guy I'm looking at. Now, I'm not saying go trade away Alvin Kamara, because if you're trading away Alvin Kamara, you better get a king's ransom, because he's by far the best fantasy running back right now, other than maybe Dalvin Cook. And with Alvin Kamara, though, there's a couple things that are popping up here that concern me ever so slightly. Not a whole lot, but ever so slightly. He had his lowest fantasy performance last week against Tampa Bay. Saints still scored a ton of points. But it came in conjunction with Michael Thomas also coming back. When Michael Thomas is back, it takes production away from Alvin Kamara. They were relying on Alvin Kamara, the Saints were, a ton. Absolutely. He was their guy. Basically, nobody else in that offense got the ball except for Jared Cook and Emmanuel Sanders every once in a while. But it was basically Alvin Kamara and nobody else getting the ball. Now Alvin Kamara goes in with Michael Thomas there, only has 9 carries, has 6 targets, which is his lowest target number since week 4 against Detroit, and puts up his lowest fantasy performance of the year. That's concerning to me slightly. Do I think Alvin Kamara is still a top 5 running back the rest of the season? Yes. But do I think you could get a King's ransom right now if there's holes at other positions for you? And looking at Alvin Kamara, so I'm looking at fantasypros.com. Fantasy Pros does a nice little thing where they take consensus rankings of defenses and they put a bunch of experts together, put the consensus rankings together, and they rate it based on stars. Being 1 star means it's the hardest schedule the rest of the year. 5 stars means easy schedule, you can do it. Alvin Kamara's schedule the rest of the season, while it might not name-wise look terrible, against running backs, it is 0 stars right now. That's how tough it is, which means it's about as hard as it gets for Alvin Kamara the rest of the year when you're looking at his opposing matchups. For that reason, I think if you are able to get a King's ransom, if you're struggling at receiver, if you don't have a startable receiver right now week to week, if you don't have a startable tight end, if you're also looking for a quarterback, I'm not against selling Alvin Kamara at the moment, even though he's probably still a top 3 running back fantasy-wise the rest of the year.
Jack, I just want to butt in for just a quick second. I know you're making the argument about Michael Thomas coming back that could affect Kamara. I don't discount the schedule argument there, but you look at the game against Tampa Bay, Drew Brees targeted 12 different receivers. That includes Taysom Hill, that includes Jared Cook, Latavius Murray, obviously Kamara, guys that maybe you've never heard of like Michael Burton and Marquez Callaway. There were a lot of names that Drew Brees threw to on Sunday night that weren't all Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara. I think if you look at Kamara's yards, 5 receptions for 9 yards is a bit concerning. But this game, honestly, they didn't need him. I mean, Winston came in for most of the fourth quarter there, and this game was over and away with. If the Saints are going to be in some competitive games, they're going to need Alvin Kamara. They're going to rely on Alvin Kamara. And I don't know, especially with running backs and how things are going right now, if I would trade such a reliable guy.
No, I think that's understandable.
If I were going to trade...
Sorry, go
Continue,
ahead.
Jack. Okay,
yeah,
I'm just saying...
Oh, my gosh. All right, I'm going. It needs to be a King's ransom is what needs to happen. I understand just trading him away is not going to happen. What I would need to get is a package like a Travis Kelce plus a DK Metcalf or something absolutely insane like that. But if that happens to come my way, and the way the running back position is going, and something like that just might come my way, I'm not opposed to throwing that out there.
Look, it absolutely depends on what the position you're in. If you drafted Alvin Kamara in the first round, Aaron Jones in the second round, and Chris Carson in the third round, absolutely I'd make that trade. But if you have Alvin Kamara, again, it depends on the position you're in. If you have Alvin Kamara and you're not that set at running back, trading Alvin Kamara away, what I'd want like a James Robinson and then like a Keenan Allen. Like, I mean, and you should be able to reasonably get that depending on like something along those lines, because Alvin Kamara is such a game-changing running back. I can understand where you're coming from, Jack. If I had Alvin Kamara, I personally would not be necessarily trying to sell too hard. And I understand you're not saying sell Alvin Kamara hard. I may be putting feelers out there. I'm all for putting feelers out there for players. I mean, you don't have to commit to anything just to see what other people value their worth at. The next player that I'm going to talk about as trading away is a guy who started off the season really, really hot. He had a down week 1, and then after that had 4 straight double-digit games, upper double-digit games, 2 of them being over 20 points. It's Mike Evans. Shane, I was just talking with you about this earlier. We value Mike Evans as about a wide receiver 3 right now. Whether Antonio Brown comes in and is actually fantasy viable, he's absolutely going to take targets away from Mike Evans. Chris Godwin, too, a little bit maybe, but Chris Godwin is more of the type of receiver that Tom Brady likes to throw to, and Chris Godwin hasn't been amazing when he's played for the most part, but he also hasn't played much. So that's where Mike Evans is a guy that I'd be looking to trade away based on A, name value, and B, he's been performing very well, including last week. Last week, he had a solid performance there, even with Antonio Brown there and with the whole team being bad. 10.4 points, 6 targets, not bad at all. But Mike Evans is definitely a guy who we think is going to start to lose some targets and stuff. So trading him away would not.
Since we value him as a wide receiver 3, what do you think is a reasonable price to ask people for if you're just trying to dump Mike Evans at this point?
I mean, I think you could get, you threw out Antonio Gibson. I think a Mike Evans for Antonio Gibson trade is one that exists out there. That'd be a solid one. You look at a one that I would love if I could get DeAndre Swift for Mike Evans, which again, I think is absolutely plausible. Or, if you're looking at kind of other wide receivers to go 1-for-1 for, I think there's a scenario out there where you could get, I mean, let's say I would take DJ Chark over Mike Evans if you could get that straight up. Just some of those guys, if you could trade Mike Evans for a solid wide receiver too, now I don't think you could get Tyler Boyd for him, but if you could, that'd be great. But again, just a wide receiver too for Mike Evans, I think would be a.
What about like T. Higgins, someone who has a fantastic schedule the rest of the way? Not that number one because Tyler Boyd is, but someone who since week 3 has put up double-digit points every single week.
Well, here's the interesting thing about T. Higgins. The targets are there. I mean, aside from week 1, you take week 1 out of the picture because he got 0 targets week 1. He hasn't had a game lower than 5 targets. In fact, has only had 3 games below 8 targets. That's very good. I mean, it's not like AJ Green isn't getting targets. He's gotten double-digit targets the last 2 games that he's played. It's just Joe Burrow is throwing the ball so much that T. Higgins gets it. And I mean, yeah, honestly, I would trade Mike Evans straight up for T. Higgins. Like you mentioned, the schedule coming up is pretty nice. I mean, you have Pittsburgh this coming week, who's actually not been great against wide receivers. Washington, who's been a little bit better. The Giants, who have been, but I'm not that concerned about the Giants. Miami, Dallas, Pittsburgh again, Houston. Those are the matchups. Dallas, Pittsburgh, Houston is playoffs, and I like all those matchups for T. Higgins. So yeah, I'm liking that trade. I would do T. Higgins straight up.
You love to see it. All right, before we move on to players that we would trade for, I'm just going to quickly hit on my last player here that I'm looking to trade away. I think I could speak for all of us here. None of us liked Melvin Gordon coming into the seasons, and I could probably list off 99 plus reasons why Melvin Gordon should not be on your team right now. I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to give a few. I'm going to start off with just the Philip Lindsay factor. You look at their snap percentages. Lindsay's on the field for roughly 50% of the time. Gordon's on the field roughly 50% of the time. It is an even split as you could possibly get. The rush attempts for Gordon the past 2 weeks, 8 rush attempts, 6 rush attempts. Rushing yards, 26, 18. The yards per carry, 3.2 and 3. Week 7, 3 weeks ago, he fumbled twice. He is not the same guy that we saw score all those touchdowns maybe a year or 2 ago, probably 2 years ago now. He's not that same player, especially in this committee that he has now found himself in. Just one more thing to throw out there for Gordon. It's not set in stone that this is going to happen, but he did get charged with a DUI roughly a month ago now, and the NFL does have a pretty strict policy when it comes to this nowadays, and they've actually upped the suspension per game to 3. So you'd be suspended 3 games per season. Gordon has not faced any of that right now. The Broncos said that they aren't going to take any disciplinary actions with him. They'd let the NFL handle that. Well, if the NFL does handle that and it comes at the end of the season and Melvin Gordon gets suspended for weeks 15, 16, and 17, well, there goes your fantasy playoffs. There goes the guy that you drafted to be an RB2 and now you don't have. Same scenario with Gurley. If you could get a Gibson for him, if you could get a Dave Montgomery for him, I think that'd be huge. But I honestly don't know at this point, just because I mean trade off of name value, but the production hasn't been there.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, you may have drafted him as an RB2, but he's not an RB2. The last 2 weeks, he has 14 carries combined, and week 8 he had 6 receptions. That's an outlier. I mean, then he's not getting 6 receptions every game. The last 3 weeks, his receptions are 2, 6, and 1. So 6 is the obvious outlier there. And if he's getting let's go on the high end. Let's say he's getting 10 carries a game and 2 receptions a game without getting into the end zone. That's not going to get you an RB2 performance.
Today, like 12 points. I don't think you want that of an RB2 the rest of the season